7:35 this morning, a segment which is going to fulfill kind of an observation that I make from time to time, that there are so many people here on the Midcoast, particularly it seems here in Brunswick, right on the heart of the Midcoast, doing so many things that you might not expect, just to watch them go about their business here on the Midcoast. This morning we're going to talk with a Brunswick resident who, while he very much lives here, has also spent a good part of his life in Asia, notably in the Philippines. He was a software executive. His name is Jim Nelon, and he has just finished a new book, which is really gorgeously illustrated. You got to see this thing if you don't believe me about that, and you'll have some opportunities to do so in the next few weeks. The book's just out, and it's called Pursuing a Dream, a Wandering Executive's Journeys into the Philippines. He's here. We'll talk to him about it 7:35 this morning on the WCME Midcoast Morning Buzz. WCME. Radio Midcoast WCME, the Buzz at 7:22, 22 past 7 on the first Monday in December. This is, of course, very much a program about the Midcoast, but for a few minutes this morning at 7:35, like about 15 minutes from now, it'll also be a program very much about the Philippines, because we're going to talk to a Brunswick resident who has spent a good part of his life there, actually continues to visit there, and has written a new book about his experiences there, a book that I think you're going to be hearing more about in various media in the next few weeks, but you'll hear about it first of all here on WCME in 15 minutes. Jim Nelon, who wrote the book Pursuing a Dream, a Wandering Executive's Journeys into the Philippines. That's coming up after the 7:30 report of WCME News, so hang right in there. We're going to talk to someone who has become a friend of ours in the last 48 hours, who walked in here the other day. Had a very interesting conversation with him about certain things we have in common, the big one being electronic media. Jim Nelon does some work in video production, also with Brunswick TV3, but he is best known for the moment for a new book he's finished, and it's a beautiful book. I think we could safely refer to this as what they call a coffee table book, right, in the book business?
It's definitely a coffee table book. It's a book that is about 2 pounds. It's on a coffee table very well. It's black and white and color pictures throughout.
Beautifully illustrated.
150 pages.
Did you take those pictures, by the way?
The pictures are all by myself.
Yeah,
the text is all by myself. The book design is by a wonderful woman in Thomaston, Maine, with the main authors publishing. She designed the book, and it's a beautiful book.
Okay, and just to fill in the blanks here, Jim Nelon, who very much lives in Brunswick, but who has spent much of his life as a software executive, and in the course of doing that work, traveled in Asia extensively, notably to the Philippines. And it really sounds, and we'll get into this as we go along here, but it really sounds as though, even though you traveled extensively through Asia, you kind of formed a special psychological bond with the Philippines.
You're correct. We actually lived in Hong Kong for 8 years, but I seldomly was in Hong Kong because I was traveling throughout Asia for business. And then that business finished for a year, and I was able to spend a year living with remote natives in the hills and mountains of the Philippines and Indonesia.
Wow.
And during that time, that's when I wrote the book and took the pictures of the people that I experienced.
So you got off the beaten path. You were considerably out of Manila, where I would imagine you spent some time. You got out into the hinterlands.
The idea was to go as far away from civilization as I knew it as Anybody in the United States might try to know it. In fact, I told my guide when I got near some village that if I found a bus anywhere near where we were, you were fired. Okay. So we wanted to go as far away from civilization as possible.
Okay, we're going to get back to that, but we're going to fill in some other what are now blanks, but they won't be blanks for long. You were born in Shawnee, Oklahoma, although somebody who comes from the Midwest, myself, and you're a little further south than I was, I don't detect too much of an accent. If you ever had one, if you ever had an Okie accent, you've definitely lost it.
We've been gone for more than a couple of years. I spent 18 years in Shawnee, Oklahoma.
So you grew up there?
Grew up there and then went to school in Texas for 6 years.
Yeah, Trinity University in San Antonio. And how did you make your way to Maine?
My wife got a degree in Syracuse, at Syracuse University, and we morphed from there throughout the world, including Hong Kong, and we ended up retired. She ended up retired in Maine, and I decided to follow her to Maine. How about that?
But you also managed software ventures for some pretty good-sized companies, and those that work took you to Asia. What? And I'm talking here independently of the Philippines or any particular spot in Asia. What lured you? You have significant interest in that continent. Why Asia?
Because we lived there and I fell in love with it, fell in love with the people, fell in love with the food, fell in love with the variations of culture, fell in love with the languages. There's so many different languages, so many different scripts. The Thai script is different from the two Chinese kinds of writing. The Korean writing is different. The Myanmar or Burma writing script is different. So it's just every time you turn around in Asia, you're finding something that is new.
It's the most notable difference, and there are many, but in general, what would you say is the most notable difference between the way we live and the way they live?
They are very happy. Not that we're not happy, but they're very happy. They have a very good, strong outlook in their future. They believe in the nature. They believe in, a lot of them are animists. And so you'll find a lot of people in the remote areas where I was believing and worshiping rain gods, sun gods, rice gods, moon gods, and so forth, because those are the factors that keep them alive and keep them going. They'll bless the plants. They'll bless the rice, of course. Rice is their main staple. They'll bless the rains to support the rice. They'll bless the heat to keep the rice going, et cetera, et cetera. So they have an outlook over there that is very spiritual and very different from our outlook here.
But at the same time, there is an increasing Western influence. Is there not?
There is. And in the places I was, the people are more interested in making sure that their village sustains itself than in the outside world. So where I was, and this book is about this, is more the isolation of the remote villages of the Bataks or the Badjaus or the Tawi-Tawis or the Ifugao tribal groups in the Philippines. And they are very much separate from what you would find if you were to go to Manila or to Cebu or to some other places that are Zamboanga down in the Mindanao island. There is, by the way, there is a huge Muslim influence down south.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of conflict going down south with the Abu Sayyaf sect of the Muslim struggle there on Basilan Island and Holo Island and places like that down off the coast south of off the coast of Mindanao, south of Zamboanga. So there is strife in the Philippines, very much so, from a military and from a religious collision between the predominantly Catholic Christian ideas and concepts of the northernmost parts of the islands of the Philippines compared to the Mindanao and the Muslim influence down in the southern part.
But you're saying, it sounds to me like you're saying that the people in these remote areas on which you focused really want to hang on to the basics of their culture as they have known it for centuries, right?
For even more than centuries, for millennia, literally. The rice gardens, the rice terraces up in the Benawi area, up in the Ifugao province, in the farthest north part of the Philippines. Those rice terraces have been there for 2,000 years. And they keep those rice terraces going with the generation after generation after generation of families who own those rice terraces in that area. And they have less interest in what's going on in the world than they do in making sure that the rice terrace continues to the next generation.
How much of this desire to hang on to their roots and the basics and the identification points of their culture, to what extent is that related to resisting modernization, would you say?
The modernization doesn't come near some of the mountainous areas. I'm going over to Indonesia and Borneo for the moment because another one of my books is on that. And those villages are maybe 5 miles apart from each other, and they have different languages, they have different structures within the villages and so forth, and they don't really understand or know what's happening outside of about 20 miles from their village.
They don't know what a computer is.
They do not know what a computer is. They do not have electricity. I had to charge up batteries and so forth before ever approaching where I was going with them. They're the lights go out at dark because the lights are candle lights, and they snuff the lights at dark.
I'm getting a sense from one part of what you're saying that these people may be impoverished, but in another sense, I'm getting the sense that maybe they're anything but impoverished.
They're the richest people in the world. They have all they can eat, all they want to eat.
Mm-hmm.
They have all the joys. They have the marriages. They have the family lives. They have the commerce of weaving things, of making clothes, of selling to the next village perhaps, but of making enough for them to survive within their own village. They're very happy. The theme that I found throughout all of the remotest villages in the Philippines and Indonesia was the happiness of the people. The very spirit that they have that keeps them going day to day is something that is very uplifting. At least for me, it was very uplifting in terms of how they perceive life, their future, their family, their existence.
They're not hungry, they are not wealthy, but they are happy. That'd be a fair summation.
That sums it up very well, Jim.
Okay. Jim Bleikamp here talking with another Jim, Jim Nelon, who lives in Brunswick, a veteran software executive whose work took him all the way through Asia many times, and he developed a particular love or zest or whatever for the Philippines, which is the subject of his new book, Pursuing a Dream, A Wandering Executive's Journeys into the Philippines. We're going to take a short break here, do some news, catch up on some stuff. We'll be back, talk more about this with Jim Nelon, and you're going to be doing likely a few appearances in connection with the release of this book.
I'll be planning to do a number of appearances.
Yeah, you'll have a chance, if you like to, show up for those, talk a little further to Jim Nelon, maybe even ask him some questions that I might forget to ask this morning, or more likely just lack the time to ask. But we'll ask some more in a moment. It is 7:49, 11 till 8 at WCME.
You found the new station for Midcoast, Maine, WCME.
7:53 now, 7 minutes till 8 at WCME, the Monday Buzz. Jim Bleikamp talking this morning with Jim Nelon of Brunswick. As I say, a veteran software executive who you've now left the software field. You're doing other things that relate to this book, like video production and some work with the Brunswick cable TV channel. So a somewhat shifted focus. The book is called Pursuing a Dream, A Wandering Executive's Journeys into the Philippines. Jim has traveled in Asia and in the Philippines for years. It's one thing I want to cover in general about Asia. I've traveled a little bit in Europe, but never in Asia. So I don't know. I'm depending on you to tell me. But I hear over and over again that while there is increasing westernization throughout Asia, the pace of life has picked up in some regards. People make the case to me that they handle it better over there. They maintain They're slower pace. They have fewer heart attacks. They just roll with it in a little bit more laid-back fashion than we are prone to doing here. Would you agree with that?
I would, and perhaps they have fewer appliances, fewer things that take them in directions that we have adopted here that they don't yet know about, or maybe if they do, they haven't adopted there. I'm speaking of smartphones and speaking of streaming this and speaking of some, well, computers in general and so forth. Because the electricity is just coming into some of these remote areas, they don't have the opportunity to do some of the things that we do here. I'll give you a quick example. I was over up in Myanmar, which used to be called Burma.
Yeah.
And we were up in the upper reaches of Myanmar, up in the Chin Win River near the China border. And we took a riverboat and we leveled the deck of the riverboat and rebuilt it into 4 cabins. And 4 of us, plus a crew of 10, cruised down the Chin Win River for 3 weeks down to where it intersects the Irrawaddy at Mandalay and Bagan. And we experienced villages along the way. And each of the villages that we experienced had a different culture, different style, different feel, different look to them. But they were all very interesting to see, very interesting to take pictures of, very interesting to think about and write about. And it's an example of being able to go into a remote area and see things that a boy from Shawnee, Oklahoma never would have thought to have seen in a million years.
What are their impressions and thoughts about us? I know that's a very general question, but what do you pick up in terms of attitudes about the United States from these various Asians with whom you interacted?
They're first and foremost bewildered about why a white boy from Shawnee, Oklahoma would ever show up, and what are you doing here? What is this all about? And why do you want to take pictures of us? And why do you ask so many strange questions?
Did they have some notable tension about you taking pictures of them?
They did. And one of the tools that I used was to have a video camera along. And I would walk into a village, and I would start first with taking videos of the kids. And the kids would be screaming and squeaming around and stuff, and having a great time, giggling and squirming and all that. And I would take pictures of that, videos of that. And then I would show the videos to the kids, and of course they would screech and scream and yell and all this kind of stuff, and really enjoy seeing themselves on the screen and playback. And the parents would come in and they would look at this and they would go, wow, that's really good, this guy's okay. So it gave me an acceptance into the community. And then I could do more of what I was there to do, ask strange questions and take strange pictures and enjoy what I could find.
Well, that's interesting, and that's, in some respects, that might be kind of obvious. If you give them a positive taste, or at least a taste of this technology that's all brand new to them, that is somehow to their liking, they're just going to feel better about it.
First time they had seen that, and it was an ability for them to watch themselves in their own skin for perhaps the first time.
You haven't been to the Philippines in a couple of years, but you're going back soon, is that my understanding?
The idea is to go back and to go to some different areas again, some areas way out in the middle of the hinterland, and experience whatever I can find there. And I do not know what I'm going to find there. The idea is to go out and do that.
Might do some more writing on all this.
The writing and photography will be both examples. A lot of video this time around as well.
Well, I can tell you I have not had an opportunity to read into the book, but I have seen it. It's a beautiful book with very engaging photography. And no matter how much we like text and pursuit of facts and stuff like that, we always like to have pictures to go with it. And that has been proven. You always do better with a post on the internet if it's done with a picture. You probably know that, and that certainly applies to this book. I would urge you to take a look. It's called Pursuing a Dream, a Wandering Executive's Journeys into the Philippines, and this is going to be available in some of the local bookeries.
Yes, talk with Gary Lawless on Main Street in Brunswick. Talk to Julie Shea at the Mustard Seed in Bath.
Okay, so you can look for it in those 2 locations. in days and weeks to come. Pursuing a dream, wandering executive journeys into the Philippines. James Nelon, retired software executive, now pursuing writing and photography and video production and stuff like that. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Thank you, Jim.
Wish you a ton of luck with it. Jim Nelon, who may be doing some appearances, places like Curtis Library and such venues, and we will keep you posted on that as they happen on WCME, where it is now 8 o'clock.
From historic Fort Andros in downtown Brunswick, this is WCME, Brunswick, Bath, Topsom, Freeport, 900 AM and the all-new 99.5 FM.